Running into my ex in an elevator. He looked at me. Then at the gaudily dressed, nouveau-riche-looking middle-aged man standing beside me, holding a child in his arms. After our eyes met, he spoke. So this is what you've come to, degrading yourself like this just to marry into money. Huh. Dad, believe me. Being rich is really not your fault. Main story. After taking my kid for his preschool enrollment medical checkup, I somehow ran into my ex. Vincent Moore. In the elevator. For years after we broke up. Damn. This was truly unbelievable. By the time I reacted and tried to step out, it was already too late. The elevator doors slid shut. No escape. And as if that weren't bad enough, the elevator broke down. Property management contacted us and said it would take a few minutes to fix. Luckily, since we were on the lowest floor, there was no danger of falling. Still, damn it. Every time I ran into him, nothing good ever happened. Spit. Bad luck. The elevator was silent during the long wait. Vincent glanced at me, then at the middle-aged man beside me. The one dressed like a walking symbol of sudden wealth, holding a child. The man didn't spare Vincent a glance. He casually shifted the child to his other arm, patted him twice, and the kid fell asleep just like that. Vincent's gaze, however, instantly turned meaningful. Sure enough. People really shouldn't be young and ignorant. Once you give your heart to the wrong person, you end up like me. A walking tragedy that's hard to explain in a single sentence. I met his gaze head-on. Serves you right. After a long pause, he let out a cold chuckle. So you really went this far, throwing away your dignity, just to marry into a rich family? What the hell? What kind of brain-melting, morality-destroying drama did this guy just imagine to come up with something that made me want to rip his mouth off? Honestly. Thank you so much. But, Dad, believe me. Being rich is really not your fault. That's right. That handsome, middle-aged man holding a chubby little boy was my biological father. My dad was busy fussing over his precious great-grandson. Completely uninterested in the sparks flying between Vincent and me. So Vincent's little speech? Delivered to absolutely no one. Heh. Hilarious. Kira, my dad said, you didn't pick Bao Bao's preschool like last time, did you? I'm telling you, our kid won't take that kind of mistreatment. I immediately smiled and nodded. Don't worry. My eyes won't go blind twice. My dad raised an eyebrow, clearly pondering why it was twice instead of once. Fortunately, my precious son was already asleep, and drooling. Which successfully diverted his attention. Otherwise, I would have died of second-hand embarrassment on the spot. Vincent, clearly not ready to let me off the hook, stared at me. Then at my son in my dad's arms. My heart skipped a beat. Thankfully, my kid eats well, and his features don't resemble Vincent that much anymore. Because when he was born, he looked exactly like him. Luckily, the elevator was repaired quickly, and we reached our floor. I thought we would never see each other again in this lifetime. Turns out, Vincent lived right across the hall from me. Unbelievable. Truly life-ending. If I went to the sales office to cancel my apartment now, would it still be in time? Just as my legs started going numb, my dad called out loudly. Kira, hurry inside. Bao Bao must be getting hungry. My dad absolutely doted on his great-grandson. According to my mom, this level of care and attention was something I never enjoyed when I was a kid. Fine. Clearly, my dear son mattered more. No time to deal with Vincent. I slammed the door shut. Peace, at last. Sigh. What kind of mess was this? My dad still had to go back to the office. He had a business trip that night and planned to pick up my mom afterward. He told me the new nanny wouldn't arrive until tomorrow and warned me not to let his grandson go hungry, or I'd be in serious trouble when he got back. Yes, yes, yes. Everyone was a precious darling. Except me. I was the unwanted cabbage growing in the field. Loved by no one. After finally seeing my dad off, I dutifully started preparing a nutritious meal for my precious son. Then, knock, knock. Someone was at the door. I assumed my dad had forgotten something. With water still dripping from my hands, I opened the door. What did you forget, T.W.H.? The rest of my words died in my throat the moment I saw who was standing there. Vincent. Still wearing the same suit from the elevator. Looking annoyingly polished and respectable. His gaze casually swept over my apartment before he spoke, perfectly serious. I ran out of vinegar. Can I borrow some from you? Me? Since when did people borrow things with this kind of entitled attitude? I felt irritation rise and couldn't help mocking him. Oh? So the young master knows how to cook now. Back when we were together, he could turn a simple bowl of noodles into a pot of glue-like sludge. Who would have thought that 4 years later, the once aloof genius who didn't touch mundane chores had learned how to cook? I didn't want to think about who taught him. All I wanted was for him to stop showing up and disrupting my life. My sarcasm darkened Vincent's face. It was clear he could no longer maintain his composed facade. "Kira," he snapped. "You never used to talk like this." I found it amusing, and laughed outright. "You said it yourself. That was the past." I lost patience and didn't feel like entertaining him anymore. "If you want vinegar, it's $2 a bag at the supermarket downstairs. If there's nothing else, stop bothering me and get lost." As I spoke, I started to close the door. Suddenly, Vincent thrust his hand into the gap. His voice rose sharply. "That old man is old enough to be your father." I froze. In that single second, he pushed my half-closed door open again. I began wondering whether property management handled neighbor harassment complaints. Vincent opened his mouth to say something else, when a crisp, childish voice cut through the tension. "Mommy, who are you talking to?" Bao Bao must have woken up without me noticing. He came out of the bedroom rubbing his eyes, still half asleep. My heart instantly tightened. Instinctively, I stepped forward, trying to block him with my body. But I was still too slow. Vincent had already seen him. I watched Vincent's expression change visibly. His gaze locked onto Bao Bao, unmoving. Afraid he might notice something, I turned away under the pretense of speaking to Bao Bao and pulled him fully into my arms. "Baby, you're awake?" I asked softly. "Are you hungry?" Bao Bao nodded. I coaxed him gently. "Why don't you go back inside and watch some TV first, okay? Mommy will make you dinner once I send the guest away." The truth was, I didn't want Bao Bao spending too much time around Vincent. Most of Bao Bao's features took after me. But those eyes. They were practically copied straight from Vincent. I didn't know whether Vincent had already realized that Bao Bao was his son. But minimizing their contact was still the safest choice. Bao Bao had always been obedient. He nodded, then said in a soft, childish voice, "Then I'll say goodbye to this big brother first. The teacher said we should be polite children." My son said it with utmost seriousness. The refusal I wanted to voice got stuck in my throat. I couldn't get a single word out. The teacher wasn't wrong. It was a good thing that my child had manners. But why did that someone have to be Vincent? Bao Bao slipped out of my arms, lifted his head, and looked straight at Vincent. "I'm going back to my room now. Bye-bye, big brother." After that, he even bowed properly. Then pattered back into his room, little feet tapping against the floor. I stared at the tightly closed bedroom door and rubbed my temple, a headache already forming. I had started thinking about how I was going to explain all this to Vincent. But when I lifted my head and accidentally met his gaze, I froze. There was something in his eyes. A kind of frustrated, helpless tenderness? "How desperate are you for money?" he snapped. "You even had a child for him. He's old enough to be the kid's grandfather. Aren't you afraid of messing up the generation?" Me. As much as I hated to admit it, Vincent had accidentally hit the mark. That man really was Bao Bao's grandfather. This misunderstanding had gotten completely out of hand. Although I had no intention of letting Bao Bao recognize Vincent as his father, for my dad's reputation alone, I hesitated. Should I explain? But Vincent didn't give me the chance. He seemed furious, his eyes repeatedly darting toward Bao Bao's bedroom. Ever since Bao Bao appeared, I could feel Vincent forcing himself to hold back. In the end, he only shot me an angry glare before turning around and leaving. I watched him expressionlessly as he opened the door across the hall and went inside. The wooden door slammed shut with a bang that sounded almost explosive. I even felt my own door tremble. The hallway returned to silence. I stared at Vincent's tightly closed door, unable to stop the complicated emotions rising inside me. This reunion with Vincent had come far too suddenly. 4 years ago, our breakup had been absolute. The day after I ended things, he flew off to the other side of the ocean. All these years, I had raised Bao Bao alone and never once imagined that our paths would cross again. After all, I was the one who dumped him. Someone as proud as Vincent probably never wanted to see me again for the rest of his life. Over the years, I had changed all my contact information. I had never once asked anyone about Vincent. And yet, despite all that, we somehow ended up as neighbors. And this time, Vincent felt different. I let out a quiet sigh. For the moment, I had no idea how to deal with a relationship where we would be running into each other constantly. Besides, this neighborhood wasn't cheap. I had no idea what Vincent had been doing all these years, but he was clearly wealthy enough now to afford a place here. My emotions were a tangled mess. That night, after finally coaxing Bao Bao to sleep, I couldn't help myself. I searched for Vincent online. Big mistake. Information about Bain Biotechnology, a company that had risen rapidly over the past few years, flooded my screen. Vincent was the founder. I stared in shock. I never would have imagined that Vincent would give up research and choose to start a company. Back in school, every prominent professor had fought to bring him into their lab. Even our university president had said Vincent was destined to make contributions to human biology. I had always believed he would stay in a lab. Who would have thought? I closed the webpage, ready to sleep. Then a WeChat friend request notification popped up. Confused, I picked up my phone. The name Vincent Moore appeared plainly on my screen, no nickname, no notes. I had no idea how he got my WeChat ID. But without hesitation, I rejected it. The moment I did, Vincent bombarded me with dozens of friend requests. I finally snapped and accepted, ready to chew him out. But before I could send a single message, he sent me a photo. On a spotless table sat a perfectly arranged meal, 3 dishes and a soup. And honestly, it looked delicious. Me. So he spammed my friend requests just to prove that he could cook now? For years apart, and I was starting to suspect that Vincent's intelligence had regressed to the level of 3-year-old Bao Bao. I didn't know what to say. So I sent him a string of ellipses. And then, a bright red exclamation mark appeared on my screen. Me. Damn it. I take back what I said earlier. His emotional intelligence wasn't even on par with a 3-year-old. Over the next few days, the number of times Vincent and I accidentally ran into each other suddenly increased. Whenever Bao Bao was around, he would put on a stiff face and refuse to speak. At all other times, he was either openly mocking me, or on his way to mocking me. At first, I had planned to explain that the man was my father, not whatever he was imagining. But the moment I saw that infuriatingly smug expression on his face, my stubborn streak flared up. Not explaining it became my attitude. Believe whatever you want. That day, I had just dropped Bao Bao off at preschool and was on my way back. I ran straight into Vincent downstairs. I hadn't planned on talking to him and tried to walk past. Who knew he'd suddenly lose his mind, take a long stride, and block my way? Kira, he said sharply, I've been watching for days now. That man hasn't visited you even once. He just leaves you alone at home with a kid, clearly he doesn't care about you at all. Why are you still staying with him? Or is it that he never planned to marry you in the first place? He kept talking on his own, while I stared at him in confusion. Kira, have you thought about how this will affect the child when he grows up? I'm honestly so disappointed in you. You used to be a little dramatic, but at least your values were straight. I never imagined you'd turn into this over the years. The more he spoke, the more indignant he became, his gaze filled with grief and outrage. Me? I laughed in anger. Vincent, is this really how you see me? He claimed he had been observing for days, but I had no idea how he'd drawn such conclusions. Was he observing with the soles of his feet? Vincent looked at me deeply and said in a low voice, the facts are right in front of me. I have no choice but to think this way. He took a deep breath, then spoke earnestly. Kira, get a job. You did well in college. You won't starve raising a child on your own. If you have to, you can come work at my company first. Relying on a man never works. A woman should have her own career. Wake up. Me. It took every ounce of self-control I had not to punch him in the face. He seemed ready to keep lecturing me. I couldn't listen anymore. After taking 2 deep breaths, I gritted my teeth and said, thank you for the advice, President Moore. Please don't advise me again next time. As for my job, I won't trouble you with it. Even if I get dumped someday, I can live very comfortably just selling my properties. As Vincent's expression grew darker and darker, my mood, strangely enough, lifted. I raised my head, smiled sweetly at him, and said without mercy, besides, who do you think you are, to think you're qualified to tell me what to do? Vincent stormed off in anger. I felt the heavy knot in my chest finally loosen. Ever since we ran into each other again, everything he said had been barbed and hostile. And yet, I had actually considered explaining things to him earlier. Even though we'd broken up long ago, somewhere deep down, I still didn't want him to think too badly of me. But now? With that stubborn belief of his, that I was willingly being someone's kept woman and refusing to listen to reason. If I said even one more word to him, I'd be betraying my father's honor. After this confrontation, I didn't see Vincent for nearly a week. Sometimes Bao Bao would notice the tightly shut door across the hall and ask why the handsome big brother we used to see every day had disappeared. Usually, I would smile kindly at him and say gently, I don't know. Maybe he became a monk. And just like that, a peaceful week passed. With no Vincent in sight. Finally, my parents returned from their business trip. And the very first thing they did upon coming home was announce their retirement. And inform me that I was to report to the company for work the very next day. Me? Feeling completely ambushed, I slammed my hand on the table and protested, I'm fine with going to work, but what do you mean you're retiring? Don't tell me I'm becoming the chairwoman the moment I walk in. What fantasy are you living in? My dad said, looking at me with disdain. I sighed in relief. Good. At least they weren't that outrageous. Then my dad continued calmly, you won't be able to convince the shareholders as chairwoman anyway. Start as CEO. As for daily operations, your mom and I are done with them. We're staying home to take care of the kid. You work hard and try to make our family business bigger and stronger. By the end, my dad patted my shoulder with great satisfaction. Then he exchanged a look with my mom. I saw it clearly. The pure joy of liberation in their eyes. Me? Fine. They only had one daughter, and somehow managed to build such a massive business. Having parents with this much career ambition was, apparently, my blessing. I sighed and resigned myself to fate, following my dad to the company the next day. Fortunately, he hadn't gone completely insane. Before he and my mom fully retired, he still planned to personally guide me for a while. This time, I specifically asked my dad to keep my identity hidden. After all, I would eventually be taking over day-to-day management. I wanted to see the real situation of each department as an ordinary employee first. I didn't want people putting on performances just to appease me. Otherwise, I might as well stay home and binge-watch dramas. I had imagined all kinds of rumors about an executive parachuting in. But never, in a million years, did I expect the most widespread rumor to be that I was my dad's mistress. When I heard this, I was completely speechless. How was it that ever since Vincent misunderstood my relationship with my father, this kind of misunderstanding had spread like wildfire? Couldn't they tell that my dad and I actually looked alike? Don't tell me they thought it was couple resemblance? I rubbed my temple and let out a helpless sigh. I really wanted to just admit my relationship with my father and be done with it. But when I thought of my original intention for hiding my identity, I decided I should endure it a little longer. Around noon, my father's secretary came to inform me that in a few days, we would be discussing a collaboration with another company. My father's intention was to hand over the lead of this partnership to me. Naturally, I had no objections. The secretary passed me the relevant documents for the collaboration. After lunch, I immediately began reviewing them. But the moment I opened the first page, my eyes widened involuntarily. Bain Biotechnology? If I wasn't mistaken, wasn't this Vincent's company? The partner for this collaboration was Vincent? I was stunned by this unbelievable coincidence. I stared at that single line of text for a full 2 minutes before finally confirming that my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. At this point, I felt even more speechless. Even more so than when people mistook my relationship with my father. This had to be what people called a fated grudge, right? With a heavy sigh, I took 10 minutes to accept reality. Then resigned myself to studying the documents. A week later, Vincent arrived at our company with his team for the collaboration meeting. When I pushed open the meeting room door, I spotted Vincent immediately, seated among the others. He looked slightly travel-worn, as though he had rushed over from somewhere else. Instinctively, I adjusted my hair and cleared my throat lightly. With a polite smile, I led my team inside. Sorry to keep everyone waiting. The meeting room instantly fell silent. I saw Vincent slowly raise his head. The moment his calm gaze landed on me, it tightened abruptly. I shot him a subtle but unmistakably malicious smile, then composed myself and walked to the table as if nothing had happened. I took a quick look at the people Vincent had brought with him. When I spotted a familiar face, I froze. Emily? She worked at Vincent's company? Emily saw me at the same time, surprise flashing in her eyes as well. Our brief exchange of glances was interrupted by the assistant's voice. I immediately collected myself, pushed my questions aside, and focused on the meeting. Today's discussion was meant to finalize the collaboration between our two companies. The new product Vincent's company had recently developed, if integrated into our production line, would drastically reduce our costs. That was precisely why we were seeking cooperation with Bain. Of course, we weren't the only ones pursuing this partnership. Regardless of what Vincent and I had been to each other, and no matter how many unresolved issues existed between us, at least in business, we drew clear boundaries. The meeting proceeded with great seriousness. To secure this contract, I had barely slept for nearly a week. And up to this point, the discussion had gone extremely smoothly. I felt confident that if things continued like this, finalizing the partnership with Bain wouldn't be a problem. Just as I was about to relax, Emily suddenly raised her hand. Judging by her seat, she appeared to be the main person in charge of this project. The moment she spoke up, everyone's attention turned to her. I looked at her, my brow furrowing slightly, an uneasy feeling rising in my chest. Emily and I were indeed old acquaintances. But we were not friends. If anything, romantic rivals would be a more accurate description. Back when Vincent went abroad, Emily had gone to another country as well. Later, I once saw a photo of her and Vincent together on her social media. That was when I realized they were attending the same school again. Thinking of this, my gaze toward Emily grew heavier. She now appeared to be a senior executive at Vincent's company. If that was the case, then during the 4 years I was absent, their relationship had likely progressed to a level I didn't even want to imagine. Emily's voice cut through my wandering thoughts. I refocused on what she was about to say. She looked straight at me and smiled slightly. President Gray, the terms you've proposed are indeed very generous. However, as far as I know, neither you nor your company has had any prior involvement in biotechnology. May I ask how we can be assured that, given your level of familiarity with biotechnology, you'll be able to keep pace with us throughout the later stages of cooperation? And if delays occur due to insufficient professional expertise on your end, will your company assume full responsibility for the resulting losses? Emily spoke quickly, her tone sharp and decisive, the unmistakable air of a high-powered businesswoman. As I listened, my gaze darkened, and a faint, mocking smile curved at my lips. Her words sounded perfectly reasonable on the surface. But on closer inspection, they were laced with disdain and deliberate provocation. I found it almost amusing and was just about to respond, when Vincent spoke before I could. If President Gray understood biotechnology to the extent you're implying, he said calmly, then what would she need our company for? His voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Yet the chill beneath his words was unmistakable. Emily's expression stiffened. She bit her lower lip, clearly embarrassed, and said nothing. Vincent turned his gaze toward me. His expression was neutral, his tone purely professional. The terms proposed by President Gray are acceptable to Beek. As for follow-up implementation, Beek will assign a specialized technical team to provide guidance. On that front, President Gray can rest assured. If President Gray has no further questions, then we can proceed to signing the contract. Setting aside that unpleasant little episode with Emily, the collaboration between Vincent and me went fairly smoothly. After we signed the contract, I politely shook hands with him. When I walked him out of the building, we happened to run into my father downstairs, who had just come back from slacking off. Vincent greeted my dad courteously and exchanged a few polite words. Standing beside them, I couldn't help flashing my dad a discreet mission accomplished gesture. Unluckily for me, Vincent caught it. His expression darkened instantly. But I had just closed my very first major project since taking office, and I was in a great mood, too lazy to argue with him over something so trivial. After seeing Vincent off, I hurried back upstairs to finalize the follow-up plans with my team. By the time I got home that night, the sun had long since been replaced by the moon. The moment I stepped out of the elevator, I spotted Vincent leaning against my front door. I froze slightly. Hearing the sound, Vincent turned to look at me. Under the warm hallway lights, his eyes looked especially bright, flickering like starlight reflected through a window. I walked toward him slowly, my expression complicated. Vincent straightened. He was much taller than I was, and now he lowered his gaze slightly to look at me. "Kira, leave that man," he said. "Anything he can give you, I can give you too." My emotions twisted into a knot. The Vincent standing in front of me now felt completely different from the man I'd faced across the conference table earlier that day. In a low, hoarse voice, he continued, "He made you his company's executive president because he saw your ability, and wants to use you. Don't delude yourself into thinking he'll really hand the company over to you. Once he squeezes all the value out of you, he'll kick you out without mercy. How are you supposed to survive here then? This isn't the same as him simply keeping you. Kira, don't be so naive." This time, Vincent was genuinely anxious. I could hear the barely restrained worry in his voice. My feelings grew even more complicated. Even if I wanted to explain things, this wasn't exactly something that could be explained clearly in a few sentences. Seeing that I didn't respond, he suddenly grabbed my shoulders. My body stiffened. I heard him say coldly, "Leave that old man. Come work at my company, I'll give you the vice president position. Do you lack money? I have plenty now. However much you want, I can give it to you. Kira, if you want someone to support you, I can do it. I'm not the poor kid I used to be. Whatever you want now, I can buy it for you. All right, Kira." By the end, Vincent's voice carried a hint of grievance. I looked at him, my gaze complicated. He sounded truly sincere. But, well, I couldn't exactly leave my dad, could I? The Shen family had only one heir of me. I hesitated for just a moment, trying to figure out where to even begin explaining. When Vincent's expression suddenly changed. "I've gone this far and you still won't let go," he snapped. "Kira, I really misjudged you." He shouted the last line at me, then turned around and stormed back inside without another word. He slammed his door so hard it echoed through the hallway. I stared at his door in shock. I genuinely couldn't understand how Vincent's temper had become this explosive. Rubbing my aching temple, I decided that no matter what, I should find time to explain everything to him properly someday. Even though I had no intention of getting back together with him, watching him add so much unnecessary drama to my life every single day was exhausting. Tired, I opened my door and came face to face with my father standing inside. He looked at me with a deeply meaningful expression. That look made it very clear, he'd heard everything I'd just said to Vincent. Me, My dad didn't say a word. He only patted my shoulder twice, heavily, then clasped his hands behind his back and strolled off to his room. I watched his leisurely retreating figure. And somehow, I felt even more tired. That night, although Vincent and I had clearly parted on bad terms, I still received a goodnight message from him on WeChat before going to bed. I raised an eyebrow, wondering when he'd pulled me out of his blacklist again. After hesitating for a moment, I chose not to reply. After that, the collaboration with Beat continued smoothly. And I gradually realized that Vincent seemed to have changed his approach toward me. For example, he'd shifted his target to Bao Bao. Every morning when I took Bao Bao to school, Vincent would always appear right on time and slip Bao Bao some healthy, tasty snacks to take with him. The first time he ran into me taking Bao Bao to school without driving, I hadn't taken the car because my driving skills were mediocre, and I was afraid of getting stuck in traffic and being late. Who knew what Vincent interpreted that as? From that day on, he insisted on driving us every morning, rain or shine. I refused righteously at first. But perhaps it was the mysterious power of blood relations. Bao Bao seemed naturally fond of Vincent. And Vincent was cunning. From the very beginning, he had no intention of dealing with me. I had no idea how he managed it, but he squatted down, smiled at Bao Bao, said just a few words, and coaxed him straight into his car. Standing by the passenger seat, I couldn't help twitching my lips. I felt that Bao Bao's awareness of being cautious around strangers really needed some reinforcement. Just like that, Vincent drove us for an entire month. And had already become a very good friend of Bao Bao's. I went from trying to stop their interactions to completely giving up. The emotional journey in between wasn't worth recounting. That day, after Vincent dropped Bao Bao off, as usual, he drove me to work. Suddenly, he spoke. Cody is very cute. Cody was Bao Bao's given name. Over the past month, Vincent had learned everything thoroughly. Oh, including the fact that I wasn't married. My dear son had sold out his own mother without the slightest hesitation. At that point, I simply gave up. Hearing Vincent praise Bao Bao, I lifted my chin proudly. Of course. You should see whose son he is. Vincent paused. After a moment, he said slowly, Cody really looks a lot like that old man. I froze. Of course he did. That was his maternal grandfather. Bao Bao was the textbook example of skipping a generation. It's just that the eyes aren't the same, Vincent added. Cody's eyes are much better looking than that old man's. Me. So he wasn't blind after all. Then how could he not see that I also looked very much like my father? I looked at him with a subtle expression, silently wondering just how long it would take him to realize that he'd misunderstood everything from the very beginning. Ever since Vincent switched to a softer approach, I had to admit, the atmosphere between us became much more harmonious. However, the fundamental issue standing between us was never brought up by either of us. And so, our relationship settled into an ambiguous distance. Neither too close nor too far. Just when I had finally gotten the hang of running the company and barely had time to catch my breath, my parents suddenly told me they had arranged a blind date for me. The man I was set up with was the son of another company's owner. About my age, a returnee with a master's degree, already helping manage his family business. They called it a blind date, but it could just as well be considered a business alliance. I had looked over his profile. Objectively speaking, his qualifications were more than satisfactory. But, as I looked at Vincent driving in the seat beside me, I couldn't help letting out a quiet sigh. I might not yet be ready to start a new relationship. Still, since this was something agreed upon between our parents, it wouldn't be appropriate to embarrass the elders by refusing outright. On the day of the meeting, I still dressed myself neatly and prepared to explain things clearly to him. We agreed to meet at an upscale French restaurant. The ambience was, admittedly, perfect for a blind date. Led inside by the waiter, I had just stepped through the door when I spotted Vincent dining with a woman. But what froze me in place wasn't Vincent. It was the woman sitting across from him. His mother. The very root cause of our breakup. Back when I was dating Vincent, I had never told him that I came from a wealthy family. At school, I had deliberately pretended to be poor, unwilling to become the center of attention. Later, after we got together, because Vincent truly was poor, I didn't want to burden him with pressure. So I simply kept up the act. I had planned that if we were still together after graduation, I would find a suitable time to tell him the truth. But I never expected that, just before graduation, his mother would suddenly come looking for me. The woman tried hard to maintain her dignity, yet she cried inconsolably in front of me. She told me she had swallowed her pride and borrowed money from relatives everywhere, just so Vincent could go abroad for further studies. But Vincent had told her he didn't want to go. The reason was me. He didn't want to be separated from me. His mother had argued with him over this for a long time, but Vincent was resolute, he refused to go. In the end, with no other options left, she came to me in tears, begging me to leave Vincent voluntarily and stop holding back his future. The first time she came to me, I rejected her firmly and righteously. I told her that where Vincent chose to go was his own decision. I would not interfere, nor would I force him into anything. But she kept coming back. I watched as she grew thinner and more haggard by the day because of her son. No matter how firm my resolve had been at the beginning, it eventually began to waver. And what truly shattered my psychological defenses was what she told me next. Vincent had chosen to study biology entirely because of his father. His father had been a brilliant biology professor, who ultimately died due to hazardous substances from a failed experiment in his own laboratory. From a young age, Vincent had been determined to complete the research his father never finished. He had persisted for so long already. He shouldn't fail at the last step because of me. I knew that Vincent's father had passed away, because Vincent always wore a small pocket watch over his chest. Inside it was a photo of his father. But I had never known that such a story lay between them. After that, I fell completely into confusion. I no longer knew whether staying with Vincent was the right thing to do. On top of that, graduation was approaching. And the graduation season was always a peak period for relationship conflicts. During that time, we argued almost every day. Finally, after one particularly bad fight, exhausted both mentally and emotionally, I said the words of surrender. Vincent looked at me in disbelief. The campus golden boy, aloof and untouchable, lowered his head for me, begging me not to leave him. But my mind was in chaos. I couldn't even sort out my own thoughts, let alone work through the problem with Vincent properly. In the end, I still broke up with him decisively. As for the reason, I made one up on the spot. I told him I despised how poor he was. That reason seemed to hit Vincent hard. From the moment those words left my mouth, he never mentioned reconciliation again. The day after we officially broke up, I heard that Vincent had gone abroad. And it was only after that I realized I was already pregnant. Pulled out of my memories by a tap on my shoulder, I turned around to see my blind date smiling at me gently. "What's wrong, Miss Gray?" he asked. "You've been standing here for quite a while." I quickly cleared the chaos from my mind. Smiling apologetically, I said, "I'm sorry, something urgent just came up. Let's meet another time." My blind date smiled generously and said, "That's all right." He opened his arms toward me and said calmly, "Since we won't be sharing a meal today, let's at least leave with a hug. I wish you all the best, Miss Gray." I smiled and returned the embrace politely. He gave me a very comfortable feeling. I wouldn't mind becoming friends with him in the future. Curving my eyes at him, I said, "You too." Then I quickly left the restaurant. In the underground parking garage, all I wanted was to get out of there as soon as possible. But just as my hand touched the car door, a strong force suddenly pulled me into a warm embrace. Before I could even turn around, Vincent's clenched, jealousy-laced voice rang out behind me, "Kira, who was that man just now?" To be honest, although I had guessed it might be Vincent, confirming it still surprised me slightly. I blurted out instinctively, "Aren't you having dinner with your mom?" "Oh, really, Kira," Vincent ground his teeth audibly. "So you did see me. Is it really necessary to avoid me like this? What, do you think I'm going to eat you alive?" I fell silent for a moment. Then I applied a bit of strength and pushed him away. "You're overthinking it," I said calmly. "I just happened to remember something urgent." Vincent studied me with a scrutinizing gaze. After a long moment, he suddenly let out a sneer. "What, did that old man dump you? So now you're shopping for your next option?" I had just relived our breakup in my head. My emotions were still a mess. Hearing him being sarcastic again, I couldn't help snapping back. "Yeah, he's too old. This time, I'm picking someone younger." "Kira, you..." Vincent was so angry he could barely speak. His eyes were bloodshot as he glared at me, and I glared back without backing down. Suddenly, a vicious light flashed in his eyes. Before I could react, he grabbed my chin and kissed me hard. There was something explosive about the kiss. As if he were venting everything he'd been holding back. I struggled desperately, and suddenly tasted iron in my mouth. Only after a long while did Vincent release me. The curse on my lips hadn't even left my mouth yet. When he pulled me into his arms again, I could feel the crushing force of his grip, his head buried in the crook of my neck, his voice hoarse and fierce. "Kira, you're not allowed to look for anyone else. I can support you too. I'm not poorer than them anymore. I don't even mind that you have a child. I really like Cody, I want to be his father. If you're choosing someone anyway, then look at me. What do I lack compared to them?" By the end, Vincent's voice carried the faint sound of tears. My heart trembled. It felt as though a tiny crack had finally opened. In the wall of emotions I'd been suppressing for years. Dense, aching soreness poured out of that crack, wrapping tightly around my heart, making my nose sting. But the misunderstandings and conflicts had piled up for far too long. There were things that, even if I wanted to say them, I no longer had the right to say. Vincent, I said softly, forcing down the sting in my nose, I stopped loving you a long time ago. You should let go too. Vincent's arms tightened around me. He suddenly raised his voice. I won't let go. Kira, you were the one who chased me back then. And you were also the one who dumped me. You wanted me to study abroad, I went. You said I was poor, so now I've worked myself half to death making money. I can give you anything you want. Don't think I don't know. Back then, my mom went to see you. You never wanted to break up with me. This time, I truly froze. My heart slammed heavily in my chest, and I blurted out, you knew your mom came to see me. Vincent released me. He looked at me deeply. The emotions churning in his eyes made it hard for me to breathe. I only found out later, he said quietly. About a year after I went abroad. He seemed to steel himself, hesitating for a long time before finally speaking. My mom, she has a very severe mental illness. I froze, yet strangely, I didn't feel all that surprised. You probably noticed it to some extent, he continued. After my dad died, she became increasingly paranoid, emotionally unstable, and extremely controlling. At first it wasn't that serious. But as I grew older and stopped obeying her in everything, her condition worsened. About a year after I went abroad, one day she suddenly stripped naked and ran around downstairs. A neighbor called the police. That was when I realized her illness had reached the point where hospitalization was unavoidable. At this point, Vincent let out a nearly imperceptible sigh. I was deeply shaken. My lips moved, but no words came out. Later, I came back once to arrange her admission. And it was then, through her rambling, that I learned what really happened back then. Vincent looked at me with pain in his eyes, slowly telling me the other side of the story I had never known. You won't laugh at me for saying this, he said softly, but the year we broke up was the darkest and most painful year of my life. I lost interest in everything. Every day, I kept asking myself, did I do something wrong? Was I really not good enough? Was that why you left me so decisively? But after I learned the truth from my mom, I was even more afraid to come back and find you. Because seeing her illness? I suddenly understood why you never told me she'd come looking for you. He smiled faintly at me. But it felt as though an invisible hand had seized my heart. The pain forced me to open my mouth and gasp for air. I was too immature back then, he said quietly. I had no real ability, yet I was so arrogant. I know I was wrong, Kira. Can you, please stop leaving me? After Vincent finished telling me everything that day, I remained silent for a long, long time. I didn't give him an answer right away. Because my own thoughts were in complete turmoil. Vincent told me his mother's condition was much more stable now. All these years, she had been living in a care facility and rarely went out. I stayed quiet the whole way home. When we reached my door, Vincent ran into my dad. My dad wore that same knowing expression as always. And naturally reached out to pull me away from Vincent. Suddenly, Vincent grabbed his wrist. His gaze was fierce as he said, "Can you leave her alone? You're already so old, aren't you ashamed of preying on someone younger?" I was still dazed and didn't manage to stop Vincent in time. Just as I was about to explain, my dad interrupted cheerfully. He looked at Vincent with a meaningful gaze. "Young man, you're telling me to leave her alone. Does that mean you plan to take over and care for her for the rest of her life?" "Not take over," Vincent replied without hesitation. "I was always planning to take care of her for a lifetime." My dad's smile widened. He grabbed my hand and, ignoring Vincent's face darkening beyond belief, said with a grin, "That's a good resolve. As for the outcome, well, that depends on your ability." With that, my dad ignored my attempt to speak. And pulled me straight inside. I stood hesitantly by the door, unsure how to explain things to him. But my dad didn't interrogate me. He walked over to the sofa, sat down, and smiled at me. "What are you so nervous about? Come sit." I hesitated, then sat down beside him. For some reason, I felt inexplicably guilty. "You don't need to be nervous," my dad said calmly. "You've been raising Bao Bao on your own all these years, no marriage, no dating. Your mom and I figured out long ago that you never truly let him go." I lowered my gaze, not knowing what to say. "We don't know what happened between you young people back then," my dad continued. "But when it comes to living life together, which couple doesn't argue? When you're young, you act on impulse. You break up, and that's that. But so many years have passed, and you're still thinking about each other. Then give yourselves another chance, try again. Even if you can't be together right away, don't reject spending time together. Kira, Bao Bao isn't little anymore. He'll want a father." Every word my dad said struck deeply into my heart. That tiny crack Vincent had opened earlier seemed to widen. The emotions I had suppressed for so long finally broke free, bursting through layer after layer of restraint. I sat on the sofa for a very, very long time that night. And when dawn finally broke, It felt as though I had been reborn. Through this period of work, my father had finally decided to retire. And to do so with full honors. Before stepping down, he planned to host one last banquet. On one hand, it was to formally announce his retirement, on the other, it was to officially reveal my identity. I had already decided to give Vincent and myself another chance. Before that, I also asked Bao Bao whether he wanted a father. Bao Bao looked at me innocently, yet with surprising insight, and said, "Mommy, do you mean Uncle Moore?" I thought to myself that he really didn't know anyone else anyway, but I smiled and nodded. "Would you like Uncle Moore to be your dad, sweetheart?" Bao Bao hesitated for a moment. My heart sank. I thought, oh no. Vincent spent all this time winning over my son, and it's still not working? Before I could figure out how to persuade him, Bao Bao suddenly asked in his soft, childish voice, "But Mommy, didn't you say Uncle Moore became a monk? Can monks still marry wives?" Me? I froze, completely and utterly. It took me a long while to dig out that one careless remark I'd once made in passing. Facing my child's pure, guileless face, I deeply reflected on my terrible habit of speaking recklessly in front of him. After finally admitting my mistake and explaining everything clearly, Bao Bao let out a long sigh of relief once he understood that Vincent was not a monk. "That's great. If Uncle Moore can be Bao Bao's daddy, that's wonderful. Bao Bao really likes Uncle Moore." He smiled so brightly. Seeing how genuinely fond he was of Vincent, I couldn't help but smile in relief as well. Soon enough, the day of the banquet arrived. That evening, I changed into a custom-made evening gown. And styled myself in an elegant, composed look. I entered the venue arm in arm with my father. Whispers immediately rippled through the room. I could feel the pointing fingers and murmured speculation around me, but I didn't care. After all, the more they talked now, the harder their jaws would drop later. Vincent saw me walking in with my father as well. Even from across half the ballroom, I could feel the resentment radiating off him, thick enough to almost become tangible. I deliberately didn't go over to him. Thinking about all the sarcasm he'd thrown at me since our reunion, he'll be the one crying later. I intentionally linked arms with my father and walked past Vincent. Only when I got closer did I notice that Emily was standing beside him as well. I raised an eyebrow, my gaze turning slightly complicated. But Vincent didn't notice me at all. All of his attention was fixed on my father. Yes, unmistakably hostile. Emily noticed me and let out a cold sneer. "Climbing your way up as a mistress, how shameless." I couldn't be bothered to argue with her. Instead, I smiled graciously. "Still better than fighting to be a mistress and failing at it," I said lightly. "Right, Vincent?" "Huh?" Vincent frowned, momentarily stunned. Then, as if recalling something, he turned impatiently toward Emily. "I brought you to events like this so you'd follow me around. Can't you go secure partnerships for the company? If you don't even have the emotional intelligence of a department head, then don't be one. Go back to the technical department. File a position transfer with HR tomorrow." Without sparing Emily another glance, Vincent took his wineglass and walked straight toward me. I was laughing my head off internally, but on the surface, I maintained an elegant, composed smile. After all, tonight I was here to show off. I couldn't afford to ruin my image. Emily had chased after Vincent for years. From a junior student to a company executive. Yet she couldn't even get a gentle word from him. Suddenly, I didn't care about that group photo she'd posted before anymore. It was probably just a moment of opportunism at some crowded banquet. Vincent walked over, clearly wanting to say something to me. I lifted a finger to my lips, making a soft, shoo gesture, and winked at him. He froze for a moment. I followed my father onto the stage. After finishing his speech, my father casually announced my status as his successor. "And one last thing," he added with a smile. "My daughter is also at the age where marriage is being considered. Everyone here knows her situation. If any of you are interested, feel free to pursue her." After saying that, he cheerfully pulled me back off the stage. The moment my identity as his daughter was revealed, the entire room erupted. Especially that last sentence. It sent the atmosphere of the banquet straight to its peak. I was a little amused by my father's sudden maneuver, but still stepped down gracefully and composed. The moment I got off the stage, Vincent grabbed me. He pulled me straight into a corner. I leaned against the wall, crossed my arms, and smiled at him. Vincent looked so shocked he was practically stunned into stupidity. He stared at me, eyes wide with disbelief. That was your dad?" I nodded with a laugh and deliberately said, "Yes. Don't you think we look very alike, except for the eyes? Just like Bao Bao." "Vincent." It was as if something suddenly clicked. He swallowed nervously, his throat bobbing. With a trembling voice, he asked, "Bao Bao isn't your dad's child, then he's—" As if a possibility flashed through his mind, his gaze toward me filled with panic. My heart softened instantly. I decided not to tease him anymore. Sighing, I smiled helplessly. Didn't you ever notice that his eyes look exactly like yours? Vincent froze. I watched as his eyes instantly reddened. He looked overwhelmed, excited, yet completely at a loss. It was rare to see him look so foolish. I couldn't help laughing. Vincent, I called softly, my voice unusually serious. I'm willing to give us another chance. His eyes lit up with overwhelming joy. He reached out, clearly wanting to pull me into an embrace. I stopped him. He looked frantic. I raised a finger and shook it slightly, smiling slyly. Listen to me, I'm not done yet. I am willing to give you another chance, I said slowly. But my dad, he's not very happy about it. Vincent froze. It seemed something finally dawned on him, and his expression twisted subtly. I was laughing so hard inside I could barely stand upright, but on the surface, I forced myself to stay serious. Well, who told you to call him old? I said innocently. There's really nothing I can do about that. Vincent's expression grew even darker. Slowly, he turned his head toward where my father was standing. His gaze locked onto him. Curious, I leaned over to see the look on Vincent's face. And then, I completely lost it. The way Vincent was staring at my father was filled entirely with regret. It was as if he wished he could strangle his past self on the spot. Just to make sure none of this had ever happened, Vincent stared at my father's retreating figure for a long while before finally speaking with great difficulty. Kira, if I go kneel in front of your uncle right now, do you think it's still in time? I held back my laughter and deliberately put on a conflicted expression, pretending to think it over. I'm not really sure. After all, you cursed him pretty viciously before. Even if I wanted to put in a good word for you now, it'd feel a bit inappropriate. Vincent's expression twisted for a split second. He ground his teeth in frustration, and I saw a storm of complicated emotions flash through his eyes. I watched him with interest, genuinely curious whether he could come up with a perfect solution. After a long moment, Vincent suddenly let out a deep sigh and pressed a hand to his forehead, clearly in pain. Kira, I admit defeat, he said helplessly. I understood exactly what he meant the instant he spoke. I quickly took 2 steps back, putting some distance between us, and raised both hands in surrender. It's not that I didn't want to explain, okay? Every time I tried, you either scolded me or slammed the door and walked away. Even if I wanted to make things clear, you never gave me the chance. I looked at Vincent with a half-smile, deliberately emphasizing the words, scolded me. As expected, Vincent immediately panicked. He stiffened, then hurriedly explained, I didn't really mean to scold you. I was just jealous. Seeing the undisguised anxiety in his eyes, my heart softened all at once. I lowered my hands, my expression gentling. In the end, I still couldn't bring myself to make things too difficult for him. My dad's side is something you'll have to deal with on your own, I said softly. I won't help you persuade him. That wouldn't be fair, to either of us. That's only right, Vincent nodded solemnly. I shrugged and patted his shoulder. As long as you're aware of that. I'll head back first, then. You can handle the rest yourself. I waved at him and quietly left the venue. After the banquet, Vincent suddenly announced that he was going on a business trip. I didn't think much of it and threw myself wholeheartedly into building up the company. The collaboration with Beak was progressing steadily. With just one sentence from Vincent, Emily was reassigned from department head back to being a technician. Naturally, the project lead was replaced as well. That was undoubtedly good news for me. After all, I had no personal conflict with the new lead, and our cooperation became far more objective and efficient. Still, I ran into Emily one day when I went to Beak for a meeting. She was standing by the ventilation outlet, smoking. When she saw me, her gaze paused briefly before she called out to stop me. I hesitated, but ultimately decided to hear what she wanted to say. After sending everyone else away, Emily led me into the emergency stairwell. She stubbed out her old cigarette and casually took out a new one. I crossed my arms and watched her quietly. The way she exhaled smoke looked completely different from the Emily I remembered. At that moment, I finally realized. During those 4 years apart, everyone had been battered and reshaped into entirely different versions of themselves. Perhaps reading something in my gaze, she suddenly let out a mocking laugh. Kira, you really are lucky. I didn't respond. Emily wasn't angry. She simply exhaled a cloud of smoke and spoke slowly. When I confessed to Vincent back then, he told me he already had someone he liked. At that time, the two of you weren't even together yet. You chased after him so openly that the whole school knew. Everyone mocked you, called you shameless, a toad dreaming of eating swan meat. And yet, you persisted. You kept at it for a full 2 years. So when I heard him say that, you were the first person I thought of. And sure enough, not long after that, the two of you officially announced your relationship. At this point, she took a deep drag from her cigarette and forcefully exhaled. The jealousy in her words was impossible to hide, and her gaze toward me turned red with resentment. I really couldn't understand what I lacked compared to you. Looks? I'm not ugly. Academics? In our major, I was only second to Vincent. We were in the same field, I had more to talk about with him than you ever did. I heard that after you two started dating, you were very temperamental. I kept thinking, if it were me, I'd never make him angry. I'd be understanding. I'd support him wholeheartedly. I'd be gentle and tender with him. I fantasized every day about the two of you breaking up, so I could pursue Vincent openly and prove that I was 10,000 times better than you. The more she spoke, the more agitated she became. Her chest rose and fell violently, to the point where I worried she might faint from lack of air. Yet I didn't know how to respond. Everything between Vincent and me, our love, resentment, misunderstandings, was never something that could be explained in just a few words. Emily had never been part of our relationship. Naturally, she couldn't understand its core. She was simply clinging pitifully to her own fantasies, unwilling to let Vincent go. But Kira, do you know, she suddenly let out a bitter laugh. You two clearly broke up. I even followed him overseas. And yet, he just couldn't forget you. She shouted at me, tears falling one after another. My heart trembled, stirred by an inexplicable ache. In his first year abroad, he was completely depressed. No one could believe he'd once been such an outstanding student. Even his advisor warned him, if he kept that attitude, he should just drop out. That entire year, he didn't study at all. He locked himself in a rental apartment every day, cutting his hands up trying to learn a new dish. Or he'd sit on the couch drinking, until he drank himself into a stomach hemorrhage and only then got sent to the hospital. I listened in shock as she revealed things I had never known. Vincent had told me that his first year overseas was difficult. But I never imagined he had suffered to such an extent. A heavy, dull pain pulsed through my chest. My vision blurred as the image of Vincent sitting alone on a couch, drinking himself into despair, vividly rose before my eyes. So it turned out that during those years when I was struggling alone, someone, thousands of miles away, was also sinking and struggling in the same darkness. Later on, the reason Vincent finally pulled himself together was that he learned from his mother that you never truly wanted to break up with him. He believed that as long as he worked hard enough and made enough money, you would come back to him. So he gave up scientific research altogether and threw himself desperately into starting a business. Isn't it ridiculous? Someone so proud and rational, reviving himself over a hope that had absolutely no proof. I listened in a daze, my expression completely stripped of the composure I had earlier. Emily finished the last drag of her cigarette. There were no tears left in her eyes now, only faint traces at the corners, betraying the fact that she had once completely fallen apart. Kira, I give up. I've held on for so many years, from school to the company, from a time when he didn't even know my name, to when he acknowledged my ability to work beside him. I've already done everything I possibly could. And you don't need to wonder how I know all this. Vincent never tried to hide it. He told everyone that there was someone he deeply loved back home, and that in this lifetime, he would never love anyone else but her. Her expression was neither sad nor bitter. She simply looked at me calmly. If, back then, I still held on to some hope, thinking that if you weren't good enough for him, I would fight for him no matter what. But now, I've truly given up. Kira, you're outstanding. I can't compete with you. Emily suddenly smiled at me. Her unexpected openness left me momentarily at a loss. She didn't seem to care. She only gave me one last deep look before turning around and walking away without another word. I stood alone in the stairwell for a long, long time. By the time I finally composed myself and walked out, no one would ever know what had happened there. I finished the meeting calmly. When I got home, I called Vincent for the first time on my own initiative. His voice came through the phone slightly distorted. I ignored his flustered greetings and asked directly, "When are you coming back?" Vincent was silent for a moment, then said somewhat hesitantly, "I'll be home tomorrow." "Is something urgent?" I took a deep breath and replied calmly and decisively, "When you're back, come see me right away. Explain everything clearly to my dad. We'll discuss the wedding." Without waiting for his reaction, I hung up. Early the next morning, Vincent knocked frantically on my front door. When I opened it, I saw him looking travel-worn, still holding a stack of documents in his hand. The expression on his face was complicated. Excitement, joy, anxiety, confusion. All emotions rarely seen on him. I crossed my arms and looked at him, lifting an eyebrow slightly. "So," I said lightly, "have you figured out how to explain things to my dad?" Vincent looked at me deeply. He took several deep breaths before finally suppressing his excitement and said calmly, "I have. Don't worry." I nodded and let him inside. In fact, I had already told my parents about everything the night before. They weren't surprised at all that I wanted to marry Vincent. After learning everything he had done for me over the years, they were actually quite satisfied with him as a son-in-law. Still, as my parents, they wanted to see a little more sincerity from him. When I brought Vincent before them, my previously calm heart suddenly tightened. Vincent walked up to my parents and, without another word, bowed deeply, 90 degrees. His expression was utterly sincere. "Uncle, I'm sorry. I failed to understand the truth before and arrogantly misunderstood the relationship between you and Kira." The three of us exchanged glances, all somewhat surprised by his approach. I raised an eyebrow at him. Who would have thought? He chose to apologize directly. So simple. So straightforward. "I thought of many ways to explain myself or to win your favor," he continued seriously as he straightened up. "But in the end, I realized the first thing I needed to do was to admit my mistakes, to you, and to Kira." I saw a flicker of approval in my father's eyes, though he still said nothing. I shouldn't have twisted Kira's character without understanding the facts, nor should I have said so many hurtful things. No matter what my intentions were, a mistake is a mistake. "I'm sorry, Kira. I'm sorry, Uncle and Auntie. I hope you can forgive my arrogance and recklessness." As soon as Vincent finished speaking, my father suddenly burst into hearty laughter. "Well, young man," he said cheerfully, not bothering to hide his amusement, "I didn't expect you to be this sincere and direct. Now we really can't hold it against you anymore." A flash of joy crossed Vincent's eyes, but he forcibly suppressed it. He turned to look at me, his emotions tightly restrained. "Kira, I'm sorry." I lifted an eyebrow and waved my hand casually. "It's fine. Since my dad doesn't mind anymore, I forgive you too. You don't need to apologize to me. And honestly, I was partly at fault too. I pretended to be poor and never told you my family was wealthy. Otherwise, you wouldn't have misunderstood my relationship with my dad in the first place." "No," he shook his head, his expression serious. "I need to apologize to you. I was too immature back then. Whenever something happened, I never considered your feelings, I only knew how to argue. If I had cared about you just a little more, I wouldn't have let you leave me while you were pregnant." His brows softened as he looked at me, and my heart skipped a beat. "Raising Cody on your own must have been incredibly hard, right? I'm sorry. I failed as a father and let you suffer all these years." I hadn't expected him to bring this up so suddenly. I froze. Vincent stepped forward and gently pulled me into his arms, carefully wiping the tears from the corners of my eyes. "Kira, these past few days, I wasn't actually on a business trip. I went back to my mom's old house. These years, watching me unable to forget you, she's already fully accepted you. Her condition hasn't completely stabilized yet, so she didn't dare see you, but she asked me to bring this to you." Vincent took a small box from his pocket. Inside lay a jade bracelet. I stared at it blankly. "This is?" Vincent lowered his gaze, a faint smile on his lips. "This is the most valuable thing in our family. It's a family heirloom, passed down from mother-in-law to daughter-in-law in every generation." He gently put it on my wrist, looking into my eyes with tenderness. "My mom giving this to you means she agrees to us being together. But don't feel pressured, if you don't want to see her, she won't disturb you again." I stared at the bracelet, momentarily lost. I never imagined that Vincent had prepared so much during this time. And yet, he wasn't even finished with his preparations. He let go of me and then turned to look at my parents. Picking up the documents set aside earlier, he handed them to my father with both hands. "Uncle, Auntie, these contain agreements for the unconditional transfer of all my assets and company shares. Everything is to be given to Kira. Please take a look." I froze and blurted out instinctively, "Vincent, there's no need, you don't have to do this." "Kira." Vincent shook his head at me, then spoke earnestly to my parents. "Uncle, Auntie, this is my sincerity. I'm cutting off all my own escape routes because I've made up my mind. In this lifetime, I will marry no one but Kira. I hope you'll agree to let Kira marry me. I promise I will protect her with my life and make sure she lives happily for the rest of her days." He spoke with absolute seriousness. My chest grew warm, and before I realized it, my vision blurred as tears welled up. My father chuckled as he flipped through the documents, then looked up at Vincent without hiding the approval in his eyes. "Well, her mother and I don't have any objections. It all comes down to whether Kira herself is willing." Vincent immediately turned to look at me. His eyes sparkled with expectation. So much so that he actually looked a bit like a large dog waiting eagerly to be patted. I couldn't help but laugh through my tears. Instead of answering him directly, I firmly took his hand. "Will you come with me to wake Bao Bao up?" Vincent's breathing grew heavy. He squeezed my hand tightly and replied in a hoarse voice, "Okay." I led him into Bao Bao's room. Bao Bao was already awake, sitting on the bed, looking at us with his big, innocent eyes. I could clearly feel Vincent tense up all at once. Smiling slightly, I squatted in front of Bao Bao and asked gently, "Bao Bao, Mommy is going to marry Uncle Moore. Do you still want Uncle Moore to be your dad?" Vincent's entire body stiffened. A CEO of a major company. So nervous in front of a 3-year-old that he couldn't even speak. Bao Bao stared at Vincent for a long moment before suddenly asking, "Is Uncle Moore Bao Bao's real daddy?" I froze. Vincent and I exchanged an instinctive glance, both seeing the same shock in each other's eyes. I asked carefully, "Why do you think that, Bao Bao?" Bao Bao tilted his head and answered innocently, "I saw Uncle Moore's pictures on Mommy's phone, and Bao Bao really likes Uncle Moore." If Uncle Moore isn't Bao Bao's real daddy, then why does Bao Bao like Uncle Moore so much? A child's words, pure and sincere. Yet it was exactly those words that made Vincent break down in tears. He suddenly pulled both Bao Bao and me into his arms. Through his choked voice, I heard him say, "Yes. I am Bao Bao's real dad. Daddy will never leave you and Mommy again." Bao Bao couldn't understand the tangled love and pain between adults, but he was genuinely happy. "Really? That's great," he cheered. "Then will Daddy and Mommy give Bao Bao a little sister too?" "Bao Bao wants a sister." Vincent froze and looked at me blankly. My heart skipped, my face flushing as I instinctively turned away. The scene was warm, yes, but discussing this kind of topic in front of our child was still a bit embarrassing. I didn't look at them, but I heard Vincent laugh softly. He pulled us both even closer. "All right. If Bao Bao wants a little sister, then Mommy and Daddy will give Bao Bao a little sister. Our family will never be separated again." Amid Bao Bao's joyful laughter, I held Vincent tightly. Our family. We would never be apart again.